Wednesday, September the 10th, 2025, will be one of those days that people will remember. Where were you when you got the news that Charlie Kirk had been assassinated? This one, folks, hit me hard. I knew Charlie Kirk. I knew him reasonably well. I've spent a lot of time with him. I've actually first met him in 2018 on the University of Georgia campus when he was there with leading one of his seminars or gatherings. I'm not sure what you call them. And 3,000 college students were in attendance. And I knew this guy was the real deal and was on to something. My wife thinks that's why he was shot, because he was being so successful, because he was being so effective. In the 2024 election, he brought tens of thousands of new voters, conservative voters, who helped Donald Trump get elected. He did not attend college. He went to the University of Texas and was there for orientation. And he had a conversation with Ken Starr, who was, that was the guy who prosecuted and led the impeachment effort against Bill Clinton. He became president of the University of Texas. And Charlie told Ken Starr what he was intending to do. And Ken Starr said, well, you should not come to college. You should go do that. And if at any time that you decide that it's not going to work out or pan out for you, don't worry, we'll have a place for you here. And so Charlie, with that encouragement, started Turning Point USA. And I got to meet him very early on. I met him at a private gathering in Atlanta where about 20 people were in attendance. And he and Candace Owens were there, and they were there to solicit donations. But he talked for the better part of an hour, and I just remember leaving. And at that point, he was legitimately just a kid. I mean, he had to have been, I'm going to say it was 8 years ago. So he had to be no more than 23 years old. And Candace was young, and she was equally bright and very convincing in her talk track. And it was a night that I will remember for the rest of my life. But I will also remember where I was when I got the news that he had been shot. And I was actually having lunch with my middle son and my wife in Norman, Oklahoma, on our journey back to Atlanta from Los Angeles, where we visited for the last week to see our new grandson, Wilder. And so we went from an emotional high, and we were excited to see our son Spencer, and we were having such an enjoyable conversation and time being with him when we got the news about Charlie Kirk. And I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. He was one of the most remarkable people that this country has ever seen. I mean, I would legitimately put him right up there with MLK and JFK. He believed what he talked about. He believed in our country. He believed in democracy. He believed in our flag. He believed in the sanctity of life. He believed in freedom of speech. And the fact that this guy, Tyler Robinson, 22 years old, I don't even think we should say his name. I don't know what motivated him. I don't know whether he was mentally deranged, Trump deranged, or whether he just wanted some sick way of gaining notoriety. Maybe he watched that guy who shot the insurance executive. You know, there were a lot of lunatics that celebrated him. That was a different deal. They those people were mad at the insurance companies for unfairly taking advantage of them and their premiums. And so that guy's solution was just to kill the CEO of the insurance company. How sick, how deranged, how sad. This is different. This was an attack, a direct assault on free speech and a political figure. One that I think that most, if not all of America loved and cherished, even those who disagreed with his beliefs. And he was fine with that. He would debate anyone at any place. And he was so brilliant that it was very hard to debate Charlie Kirk, because not only was Charlie Kirk right, but he was also a very effective debater. I saw him debate many times, and I was really pleased to have gotten to spend over an hour with him just one-on-one 8 or 9 months ago. And as with all of my encounters, I just left the room saying, my gosh, I'm 71. This kid is 30, and he's got a wealth and a depth of knowledge that I'll probably never have. So it's beyond sad that Tyler Robinson, 22, could have plotted this. I am learning just in the last few moments that Tyler Robinson confessed to his family. His father helped arrange to turn him in, which I think had to probably be the hardest thing that he's ever done. I also think that he wanted Tyler his son to be taken into custody without violence, without risking his life. The governor of the state has made it clear that they support the death penalty. I don't think the future looks good for Tyler under any circumstances. And so it's really sad for his family, but it's more sad for Charlie Kirk's family and Charlie Kirk's 2 children that are 1 and 2 years old, a boy and a girl, who were just stripped and robbed of their father so unnecessarily. And it's just demonic that anyone could be brought to doing this kind of an act of violence. And to what end? I mean, did he really think that it would accomplish anything? Because I can tell you that it is going to have a chilling effect, short term, I believe, on people's willingness to speak. But ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what every single one of us must do in reaction. We cannot be bullied. We cannot be tormented. We cannot be threatened. We cannot be censored. We cannot be canceled. This is the United States of America. The First Amendment to our Constitution grants us freedom of speech. It is a value that is of the highest order in our country. It is a solemn value, and we cannot allow it to be interfered with, not even for a moment. I want you to stay tuned today. We have a very good interview with Jeff Dornick. He is an author, he is a young man, and he is a defender of free speech. And we had a very good and stimulating conversation about freedom of speech, about the sadness surrounding Charlie Kirk's assassination, and may he rest in peace. So with that, let's go straight to our first interview. This is The Truth. I'm John Gordon. Thank you for joining us today. Today's broadcast is brought to us by Perfect Circle Renewable Energy, a restaurant service company located in Greater Atlanta. They service restaurants. They'll pick up your waste vegetable oil, clean your grease trap, clean your vent hood. They'll also sanitize the front of the house and the back of the house. PCRenergy.com. That's PCRenergy.com. If you're a restaurant owner and you're tired of automated attendance, unreliable service, and messy service, what these people are dealing with is just flat out messy. Perfect Circle gets it right. They don't spill, they don't mess up. They will actually leave your collection area better than they found it. So look them up on the web, PCRenergy.com, and give them a call if you have a restaurant and want good, reliable, clean service. We come to you as every Saturday and Sunday from noon to 2 on the John Fredericks Radio Network, 8 cities, 22 AM and FM radio stations, as well as CDM.press. They've taken our stream and put it out on all of their digital platforms. And we have a lot of listeners on CDM Press's social media platforms, including Getter and Rumble and X and Facebook, just like we do. You can come and interact with us on Getter.com right now on the John Fredericks station and page. We've got several thousand people there right now, and you can join them. And while you're over there on Getter, if you would take a moment to subscribe to our channel, and for that matter, if you would do so on all your social media, just look for John Gordon Truth on Facebook, X, Getter, Rumble, YouTube, and subscribe to our channel. It costs you nothing. It'll take you about a minute if you were to go search for John Gordon Truth on each of those platforms and subscribe to us there. We would be so eternally grateful to you. All right, with that, let's get to our first interview. There's so much in the news these days. Charlie Kirk, our government buying a stake in Intel, social media, high tech, throttling people whose speech they don't like. Jeff Dornick is an author and an entrepreneur. He's written several books. Actually, he's got Church and State, Social Injustice, and his new book, Following the Leader. Jeff, welcome to The Truth.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Been looking forward to chatting with you.
And you've got your own podcast called The Jeff Dornick Show. And you've got your own social media site called Pickaxe. That's an unusual name.
Yeah, and I always say too, it's like between all the different millions of things that I do, and then any free time that I do have, I'm chasing a 3-year-old around the house, so it's it makes life fun. But yeah, like with Pickaxe specifically, like the whole idea was having a constitutionally protected free speech platform, which is very rare, if at all, out there. But also helping creators and show hosts and podcasters and bloggers and everybody to actually have more direct access to their audience, because that's something that everybody is struggling with, whether you're in politics or you're in other industries as well, is people are struggling because the algorithms have kind of taken over and they manipulate the feed to where it really doesn't matter what kind of audience you've built anymore. It matters about whether the content that you're putting out there, the algorithms actually want to promote. And so it's a very weird scenario out there. And that's one of the reasons why I ended up building, Pickaxe is to create an alternative that actually put our users and our creators first, which is, again, very unusual in the social media space.
Now, how did you come up with the name? That's kind of out of left field, it seems.
Yeah, so I didn't want something too on the nose, and because I wanted something that it meant something, it represented something, and also I wanted something that we could turn into a verb, and so we ended up throwing ideas around, and we came up with this idea of Pickaxe. Because free speech is messy. It emotes more manual labor as opposed to the typical high tech, kind of sci-fi type of a name. But it's like we're picking away at the power and control that big tech and these big companies have over us. But then also on top of that, if you're on the platform, if you like a post, you pick it. If you don't, you axe it. So we were able to kind of turn it into a verb from that standpoint and play with that. But I think, to me, the really big driver for this is just the idea that, if you want free speech, we have to be, constantly working at it. We have to be okay with things getting messy, and we get dirty, and we're taking control of our own, basically our own content, our own voices, and actually working to break away from the hold that big tech and these big corporations have over us. And so that was really, all that went into, picking the name Pickaxe.
When John Kennedy was assassinated, and I was just a little boy, but my entire life I've carried those memories with me. I was home from school and I watched everything unfold on our family TV, and it left an indelible impression on me. And as a political science major in college, I've always just sort of internalized that he, made the wrong people mad, that he was a threat to the military industrial complex. Charlie Kirk's assassination, however, seems to me to strike a blow directly, and I don't mean this metaphorically, but at the heart of free speech. And that seems to me to be one of the worst things that I can remember in my life, frankly. That you have a 31-year-old living in a free country with the ability to select our leaders, playing within the bounds, playing by the rules, and someone just decides they don't like what he says. I mean, my wife, who's apolitical, she's a wonderful person, by the way, but politics is not her thing. She said, well, that's obviously the Democrats because he was having too much success in recruiting young voters to vote conservative and Republican. Do you have any thoughts on this horrible tragedy, Jeff?
Yeah, it's one of those things where when you look at Charlie Kirk, as so many people have pointed out, and your wife pointed out as well, is that he's very effective at what he does. And I sent out a Substack yesterday, kind of talking about this. But when you look at Charlie Kirk, he said repeatedly that he's like, if we actually want to save this country, we have to have conversation, we have to have disagreement, and we have to be civil about it. We have to listen to the other side, we have to discuss, we have to debate, because as soon as both sides stop talking, that's when violence happens, that's when civil war happens. And he's like, I'm trying to avoid that by doing this. So you've literally got a guy who believed in free speech, in the free exchange of ideas, in debating, people that he disagreed with, and he would go into the lion's den and be willing to have difficult conversations
Oh,
with people
I
who
think he relished it. I think it was to some extent a sport for him. And I knew Charlie Kirk. I knew him reasonably well. I've spent a lot of time with him. I spent over an hour with him just a few months ago, one on one with a friend of mine, Charlie was soliciting for donations, and we spent a very enjoyable hour and a half talking to him. And I suggested to him then that I thought he would be a great vice presidential candidate, and he said, "Well, I'm too young. I can't do that for another 4 years." But he didn't say that he wouldn't. I really felt he was destined to become a serious candidate for president of the United States. But in addition to losing, just a really good guy. I mean, he didn't go to college, yet he was one of the smartest people I've ever met. And I asked him, I said, Charlie, how did you acquire all your knowledge? He said, I'm self-taught. He said, I just incessantly am reading. And my biggest concern is that the impact that it will have to chill free speech in this country.
Yeah. Well, I think it's definitely a very big concern, and it's even concerning because there's even some Republican, I forget if it was a senator or a congressman that was actually wanting to ban people who off of social media platforms that were celebrating the assassination of Charlie. And you're like, okay, I get the sentiment of that, but at the same time, if we're truly a free speech platform, as long as people are reacting to that, and this is where I go back to when I was talking about the name of pickaxe. It's like free speech is messy, free speech is dirty, free speech allows for completely offensive, insane things, and we have to defend that. And I think that Charlie Kirk was one of those guys. He truly believed in the First Amendment to its nth degree. The thing especially with this assassination that I think is so chilling to me is how it shows how powerful the mainstream media is and how powerful the Democrat Party is. Because when you think about it, they've been able to brainwash and manipulate their base to actually believe that Donald Trump is the equivalent of Adolf Hitler, and anybody who's associated with him is basically the equivalent of a Nazi. So when you actually think about it from that perspective, you're like, you get how they radicalize people in order to try to assassinate somebody as loving and caring and as Christian and biblical and nice and kind as Charlie Kirk, because they've literally brainwashed their base to believe Trump's Hitler and Charlie Kirk is a Nazi simply by being associated to Donald Trump. And this is where we need to start figuring out, how do we break down the barriers? How do we have conversations with people that actually start rationally thinking about things and getting a different opinion? Because a lot of people that I talk to out here in communist California, they never hear a conservative perspective. They never talk to a conservative or a Christian or hear an opposing point of view. All they're doing is being inundated with Democrat leftist talking points from the mainstream media and their favorite Democrat politicians, and they're never hearing the other side. And that's where Charlie Kirk was so effective. He would go into the lion's den and he would actually bring an opposing perspective and be willing to debate these people, and then actually allow them to have to encounter and rationalize against a conservative perspective. And so we've got to figure out, how can we continue that mission that Charlie Kirk was doing as an entire movement and break down those barriers and really reach out to the everyday people that find themselves brainwashed by the Democrat Party.
The thing that these liberal Democrats really, in the aftermath of Charlie's assassination, some of them, including AOC, said, well, when you spew hate, you risk consequences like what occurred to Charlie Kirk. I find that statement contemptible. I find Matthew Dowd contemptible, who was blaming Charlie Kirk for his own death, in effect. And he got fired from MSNBC. Should he have gotten fired because he made statements that were worthy of contempt?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think anybody who, especially if your job is in the public light and you're a commentator, or you're a politician or whatever it is, I feel like if you're going down that route to where you are commending, or basically blaming the victim of a murder or an assassination, yeah, you should probably be fired. And I think that, because again, you're forward facing to the audience, and you're supposed to be, sharing your opinion on things. Like, yeah, and I think that this is again where we have to differentiate when you're talking about the First Amendment. The First Amendment is specifically restricting the government from, restricting your speech. But if you're a private entity or private company, you have every right to, fire somebody for saying something contemptible. That's completely within the bounds of your authority as a company. And I think that it's wise to do that, because we should not, as a society, tolerate that kind of celebration when it comes to our culture, our society. Like, we need to value human life. But I think also the response that we've seen from the left to Charlie Kirk's assassination also goes to show how little they actually view life. And that's the really interesting thing. Obviously, we all understand that when it comes to things like abortion, but when it comes to actual full grown human life, if you're not in their club, they don't value your life at all. They could care less. In fact, they actually rejoice when you are caused harm, when you're killed, even when you're assassinated like Charlie Kirk. they don't value life. And a lot of it's because they don't believe in God. They don't believe in our creator. They
Yeah.
don't believe in the one who gives us those inalienable rights that cannot be taken away by the government. So if you don't believe in God, you don't believe in rights, because guess what? If God doesn't exist, then there is no rights giver. But then on top of that, you don't have any intrinsic value as a human being, because they don't believe that you're created in the image of God. That was the beauty of what Charlie Kirk always talked about, is he always brought God and his faith and his Christian faith back into it. And it's so important, because if you're going to value human life, you have to understand why we value human life. And you have value just by being alive, because you're created in the image of God. The left doesn't believe that, because they don't believe in God.
It's incredulous to me that they would call Charlie Kirk's speech hate speech. When I heard Charlie Kirk talk, and I've heard him a lot, I mean a whole lot, and I had him on this radio show. We had a nice half-hour conversation and interview, and when I heard him talk about free speech, the Constitution, respecting the flag, not giving way to hate, and not giving way to these labels that they want to put on people that say things that they disagree with. And I'm wondering, what component of that is hateful? To love our flag, to love our country, to love law and order, to love God, to love life, to value the sanctity of life. Tell me, where is the hate?
Yeah. Well, but see that, but that's the problem, is that they never actually define hate or hate speech.
They don't define anything that they say.
That's true.
They say you're sexist, you're misogynist, you're homophobic. All these labels, they accuse people of being things, but they never say you're ist because you said this. It's just always vague. And I'm on this one chat thread on Facebook, and I don't know what you call it. I guess it's not a chat thread, but it's a place where people post on this one individual's page. And he is a retired, esteemed, former national media, a journalist and an executive at the highest level in our country. And they just go around bragging about each other and saying what wonderful people they are. Like that gal on CNN that Trump hates. I don't know that he hates her. He really doesn't like her, though. Neither do I. What's her name? Anthony, you got to start watching the news more. Caitlin Collins, is that her name?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Is that the reporter on CNN that is always going? And they say, oh, what a wonderful person she is. What an outstanding journalist she is. How smart she is. But they never give you the why. I mean, why do you think she's smart? Why do you think she's so brilliant? Because she's just constantly going at Trump night and day, relentlessly. And 90% of the stuff that she says is just not true.
Yeah.
And it just gets under my skin so bad, I don't know what to do. But I don't know, Jeff, whether firing Matthew Dowd was the right thing to do or not. I mean, I celebrated it. I was so excited and so happy. And, and effectively, he has been canceled. Is it right when we do it? I know it's wrong when they do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we did it with justification, and we didn't do it on the basis of rumor. How many men's lives and their marriages and their families were completely shattered and broken apart because they were accused of sexual abuse or overreaching. And I wonder how many of those people were innocent and were not culpable even a little bit.
Right.
Because back in the Me Too movement, all you had to do is just say it. You just had to say, he hit on me. He took advantage of me. He was inappropriate with me. You didn't have to define it. You just say, hey, Jeff's inappropriate to me. X, you're done. Fired. Your career is over. Your marriage is over. Your life is effectively over. So I don't know. I'm really struggling with this. I can tell you that this Charlie Kirk thing has hit me, and it's hit me hard. I mean, I don't mean to give the impression that Charlie and I were best friends or on speed dial. I did have his cell phone number and his email, and we communicated sparingly, usually with a purpose. But that aside, it was just that this was a 31-year-old brilliant person who was standing up for his convictions and what he believed in. And by the way, there is a dramatic and discernible trend by young people to come back to the church and to embrace Christianity and Christian values and conservative values.
I would largely say that Charlie Kirk had a huge part of that. Especially for young men coming back to the faith. And I think it's when we're talking about kind of going back to what you're talking about with the whole cancel culture thing. It's something that I totally agree with you, especially when it came to the Me Too stuff and all of that. I think that the difference here, as far as I know, is like MSNBC fired that guy almost immediately.
Almost on the spot. That wasn't that you make a very valuable point. It wasn't a conservative reaction to conservative pressure.
Right.
It was just a fundamental, boy, that is flat out wrong. Goodbye, you're done.
Right. It's like you crossed. It's like he crossed a line, and like, look, we can't go that far. And I think I would totally disagree and oppose. Let's say if a social media platform came in and kicked him off the platform for saying that, because that's technically not illegal speech, but it's reprehensible. And that's where it's like, as MSNBC, you don't want that representing you as a company. So I get why they would fire him. The problem with like Me Too was it was all based on accusations, unverified. Okay, you even have an accusation against you, we're done. We can no longer work with you. That level of cancel culture was nuts and insane. But I think to kind of you just bring it back to Charlie. I think it's important. I think for us all to look at what he did and how he did it, because and also look at why and how he was so effective. He was effective because he was going into the lion's den, but he wasn't hostile. He wasn't hostile to people that disagreed with him. He showed people respect. I think, I've seen a lot of different people, they go onto college campuses and they almost kind of like look down their nose at a lot of these, leftists that come up and talk to them. And it's always about, we're going to destroy the left and own the libs. With him, it was like an actual legitimate, like, I want to hear your perspective. I want to hear you try to change my mind. I'm going to give you my best argument, and let's have a civil conversation and civil dialogue. And I think that he was so successful. And I've talked to several different college age kids who changed their minds specifically because of Charlie Kirk and how effective and rational and logical he is. And when you actually sit down and you think about it, it's like he showed respect to people even that he vehemently disagreed with. That's something that I think that we need to learn. Like, I think that I think we can show utter contempt for the elites, the politicians, the mainstream media, because they're disgusting and vile and corrupt. But to the everyday people that find themselves on the other side of the aisle or that disagree with us, I think we need to show love and grace and show compassion and show respect to people, because they do have value. They are human beings. And that's what Charlie Kirk, I think emoted. His faith lived through that in the way that he talked and he interacted with people that he disagreed with. And I think that that's honestly why he was so much more effective than pretty much anybody else in the conservative movement.
So we've just found out that the assassin is a guy named Tyler Robinson. Now, I've got 3 sons. I love them so much. I'm so very proud of them. Can you imagine if you were watching television and you saw your son in black uniform and you recognized him as the assassin of Charlie Kirk, and you picked up the phone and called the FBI. That's what Tyler Robinson's father did. That must have been the most difficult call that he ever made. And he was absolutely so courageous and correct to make the call. Tyler Robinson, 22 years old. That's just breaking as we've been doing this interview. We know nothing about him. But it appears that he's been captured alive, which is a first. And maybe we'll be able to get to the bottom of whether he acted alone through some derangement or whether he was part of a cult or whether he was somehow part of something larger. I really haven't heard even the conspiratorialists really saying that Charlie was a victim of a organized or well planned plot from a group of people. Hopefully we will learn the truth and learn the details. Do you have any supposition on your own? I mean, Anthony over here is a marksman. He collects guns. He's kind of, I don't know, he's kind of out there. But he said that shot that this guy took was not just a throwdown. That it required skill and some degree of precision. Any hunches? What's up here?
Yeah, so I think with this, I was just talking with a really good friend of mine who's also in the media and stuff, and we were talking about this very thing. And because when you actually look at the angle from the FBI posted a photo of where he took the shot from, looking towards where Charlie Kirk was sitting, and like there you sitting there, and then you've got a building that's coming out that's almost in between, not quite, but slightly off to the right. Where the corner of the building it would be blocking a huge percentage of the crowd that's right there. And so even if he was off just slightly to the right, he would have hit the side of the building. And so, to me, the hard thing with this, and the FBI kind of talked about this a little bit, I think it was either this morning or late last night, where, they do know that he was in communication with somebody else on Discord. And that he was coordinating with them for, dropping off the gun, picking it up. I've been hearing reports that that he actually got the engravings with the casings. It was already on there, so there's definitely potential that he was working or coordinating with somebody else. I know John Solomon and some other people as well have been saying that there's chatter within the intelligence agencies, and I think Sean Hannity confirmed it last night that he was told by somebody in an intelligence agency that there may have been like a foreign agency or foreign government or something like that was somehow involved, maybe through that Discord chat. I have no idea. So we're gonna hopefully get down to the bottom of this at some point very, very soon. But I think that we still need to be asking a lot of questions, just because we can't let what happened to Donald Trump's attempted assassination happen again, because what ended up, they just kept kicking the can down the road, and then eventually people kind of moved on, and we still don't really have answers to that. You go back to pretty much look at all the different assassinations that have happened. There's discrepancies in a lot of them. And I feel like we rarely, if ever, get answers. And the question is why? I don't know. But that's why I think we need to continually put the pressure on, because this one was different. Charlie Kirk was different than a lot of the other assassinations and assassination attempts that we've seen. With Trump, you get the Trump derangement. People are insane. They're crazy. He's running for president. He's going to become president of the United States and actually have decision-making power. And if you truly think that he's Adolf Hitler, I get how somebody who's brainwashed and pushed with propaganda would feel like, okay, this is the moral decision to do this. You look at things like that. You're like, okay, you get that. Charlie Kirk was the nicest person you would ever meet. Charlie Kirk was not a politician. He was an everyday conservative voice. He was talking to people. He was anti-violence because he was trying to have conversations to avoid the violence. I can't think of another assassination to me that was this shocking of somebody who wasn't a politician in America since like MLK Jr. Like when you actually think about it, they were just like they were a leader of a movement of that were both nonviolent, and they were assassinated for that. Like, to me, That's how shocking this is. He was not a president. He was not a politician. He was not somebody who had like decision making power, and he was still taken out in this fashion.
Husband, father, patriot, 31, athlete. I mean, it's just shocking that we could get to this place, and I really am worried about our future as a country, not so much as a country, but as a democratically governed country. Um, I also think Charlie had beliefs or suspicions that he was going to be assassinated. Evidently, he told a number of people that he felt that he was perhaps going to be assassinated, and I, I guess he had been critical of Israel of late, and was vocal about his concerns about Israel and their treatment of the people in Palestine. Another very difficult issue. I've repeatedly said on this station in this broadcast that I am sympathetic for people who don't have shelter, clothing, food, any form of security, any reason for optimism about their life. But unfortunately, Palestinians have thrown down with Hamas that killed 200 people at a pop festival and have brutally, savagely killed women, pregnant women, and young children. I mean, how can you have any compassion? How can you have any sympathy for people that behave in that fashion and commit these sorts of atrocities? And I mean, I think the enemy is not the Palestinians, the enemy is Hamas. And I don't have a solution for dealing with Hamas other than complete annihilation. And if someone has a better strategy, please let me know. You can email me, johngordontruth@gmail.com. I'd like to hear from you. I've searched my brain, I've searched my soul, I've searched social media and the news media. I haven't read where anyone is offering a solution to how you deal with savage terrorists.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point, and the thing for me is I look at it and I see some valid points, I think, on both sides of the argument. I get the side, and this is where I think a lot of people have gone into the anti-Israel crowd. I get the side of, like, you don't like seeing non-military people getting killed. You don't like seeing civilians, women and children getting killed. On the flip side, I've also talked to military guys that have been active duty in Afghanistan and in the Middle East, and they've told me specifically that he's like, these kids are brainwashed, where the entire population is basically taught that if you kill an infidel, or you kill an American or whatever it is, then that's a good thing. And also, I've spoken to military guys that have said that, like, look, we can't physically go into every single house and school and hospital and pick out the difference between a civilian and one of their military people, because it's not like they're dressed in a uniform. They don't have like a football jersey on that says, "Hi, I'm a Hamas terrorist." They blend in with their surroundings, and that's very intentional. So they're like, it's not feasible to say we're going to go knock on doors and ask, "Hey, is there a Hamas terrorist in here?" and we're going to arrest you. That's not how it works when they're literally hiding. So I get both sides of the argument, and I think that that's where it's like we need more conversation about this, and more discussion and understanding of the other side. And that's again, to commend Charlie on the way he was handling. I think that he actually handled, even when he brought up his concerns with Israel and certain aspects of it, he still did so with respect and with grace. It wasn't a lot of this anti-Semitic BS that you see on a lot of these from a lot of these other influencers. It was coming from a level of compassion and logic and all of that, whether you agree with them or disagree with them. But to me, again, he showed us how we should handle ourselves in a lot of these situations, and I think he was a perfect example for us.
Well, I think that he was joined by Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson as well, who have expressed concerns, and now they are just knee jerkly and reflexively categorized as people who hate Jews. And I just don't think that's a fair representation at all. But evidently, Charlie thought that he was a marked man and was worried about being assassinated. He had on a bulletproof vest. Supposedly, the bullet struck the bulletproof vest and ricocheted into his neck and just died so tragically, horrifically, unnecessarily. And anyway, it's just a very sad thing, very sad occurrence for him, his family, and our country. So let's switch gears and talk about something that's a little less depressing, and that is the United States government is invested in Intel. And in exchange for our investment, Donald Trump extracted a 10% ownership of Intel. You're not too keen on that, from what I gather.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the federal government having a financial stake in a private corporation. I believe in the separation of the state with business, because for a variety of reasons. One is that our government's supposed to be neutral when it comes to things, especially when our own government is passing legislation that could potentially benefit or cause harm to a company. Also, when you're talking about the Justice Department, are they going to do investigations? If the federal government has a financial interest in a corporation, are you really going to send the Justice Department to go investigate something that they may or may not be doing? There's a whole variety of issues here where there's a conflict of interest when you begin to have a financial stake and you begin to pick winners and losers. I think the other component of this is that this is my concern is that the federal government is already way too big, and I think one of the things that RFK Jr. has really showed us with HHS and all those departments is just how corrupt these big corporations are with our own government, and how they use the regulating agencies to their benefit, to let everybody, make sure that everybody feels like, oh, it's totally safe to get this vaccine, it's totally safe to take this pharmaceutical drug, when in reality it's causing disease, disability, and death. So when you're looking at it from this perspective now, and it's like, okay, so now we have a 10% stake in Intel. What does that say to, let's say, Intel's competition? Is that fair to their competition? Where it's like, okay, now we're picking them to actually be basically a vested interest. How does that impact if Intel's going up for a government contract to provide their chips with for our intelligence agencies or military or AI or whatever it is? Do they automatically have a leg up because there's a 10% stake from our government? I don't like this blending together between the private and the public world. And we saw kind of the first steps of this with President Trump during COVID, where we had all these public-private partnerships with big pharma. But now this is a public-private partnership where now there's a vested interest. And and a lot of people have said to me, like, well, it's only 10%. It's a minority stake. They don't have voting power, all of that. Okay, that's fine. But what's to stop them from with the next company doing 15% or 30% or 50% or 60% or owning them outright? I was on with Matt Gaetz actually last week debating this, and he was actually calling for like the nationalization, or basically taking over Boeing and some of these other companies altogether and having the government own them 100% of the time. And I'm just sitting here and I'm like, do we really want the federal government physically owning private companies? No, we need to keep that separate. We need a free economy. To me, this is one more step towards socialism, or at the very least crony capitalism. They could be hijacked by the wealthy elite that are running all these corporations and kind of screwing everybody else.
Well, I spoke out against it and made similar arguments to you. I'm really disappointed to hear that Matt Gaetz, of all people, would be supportive of it. I think Matt Gaetz is going to support anything that Trump supports, basically. And I have so much trust and faith in the president. I err on that side too. I make no apology for it, because usually he turns out to be exactly right. I think the thought is, and I heard the guys on the All In podcast speak about this, and they spent a good 20 minutes discussing it. to a person, all four of them, Jason Calazone, David Sachs, David Friedberg, and then the other guy, who is the smartest hen in the house. Um, anyway, they made the argument, well, we bailed out General Motors, we bailed out Chrysler, and we've bailed out from time to time other private entities. And what did we get back for it? We got our money back. We may have gotten even a little bit of interest. But what about being able to capture the upside that results from our investment? And why deprive the American people from that? And maybe there is a way that we can have our cake and eat it too. Maybe it could be put in some sort of a blind trust. My own personal preference, and the details have got to be worked out. Okay, it's not simple, but I would like to see the Social Security Fund be able to benefit from our investment in Intel. Now, the problem is it may turn out to be a horrible investment. If they would let you and me invest the money, Jeff, I'd feel perfectly comfortable with it. But when you get politicians in the act, and I just don't know, even Jerome Powell, somebody that I've really felt like has struggled to do a good job under a lot of very difficult circumstances. I've even lost faith and confidence in him because I've now come to the full circle. And while I do think that he deserves credit for having managed our economy and not allowed it to devolve into a recession, that's sort of been my talk track. But now we find out now that the jobs were overstated by 1 million people. I mean, I just get so damn sick and tired of this stuff. I don't know what to do. How would Jerome Powell have reacted had he known that we were not adding 1 million jobs to our economy, and instead we were, our job count is down 1 million jobs? Now, I think that more than Trump, and I wish Trump would lay off him, because you can back a guy into a corner and they don't then act rationally, and they'll come out swinging instead of, meet him in the middle of the room and have a conversation. And I wouldn't go on national television and embarrass him over the cost of the construction overruns at the Federal Reserve, even though maybe he should be embarrassed. But if our goal is to look out for the American people and to do what's best for the American economy, I don't know that humiliating the chairman of the Federal Reserve, which may cause him to take a position that he otherwise may not take, isn't necessarily the right answer. Now, Trump is Trump, and he knows the art of the deal, and he is a very brass knuckles, accomplished business person. So, who am I to tell Trump what to do? I just would have preferred diplomacy with Jerome Powell. Now we're at a position where we desperately need a rate cut. And I think that it should be a 0.5 point, not 1/4 point. And I think if Trump had maintained some sort of a relationship with him, maybe we could have gotten that. Maybe there's still hope for it. But I'm just sort of gotten off track and I'm rambling along here. Let's take it back to what about a sovereign wealth fund? What about a mechanism by which we can invest? And one way we could do it, we don't have to jump into the deep end. What about taking an Intel investment and say, okay, we're going to take 10% of Intel, but we're going to compartmentalize that and put it into the Social Security Fund?
Yeah, the problem that I think we have is there's so much potential for corruption, and I think one of the things that we've seen is that the federal government is pretty much corrupt 98% of the time. So I could definitely see if we've already set this precedent. So it's not like if we set this precedent, we've already set this precedent. So what's to say that, okay, let's just hypothetically say Donald Trump does everything exactly right with this investment. Okay, it's a blind trust. We're going to do this. We're going to take these precautions to make sure there's no corruption. Okay, fine. What happens if and when Gavin Newsom becomes president in 2028? Now what happens? Now you're dealing with somebody who has a record and a history of using the government in order to benefit his wealthy friends. So, now you start getting into the corruption of the federal government. We have to look beyond just President Trump. We have to look at, okay, what happens if the Democrats take over next time? What happens if the wrong person gets in office and begins to use this to their benefit? This is one of the reasons why I think it's a dangerous precedent. And to kind of highlight this point, you go back to the founding of our country. There was only one time when the federal government, up until the early 1900s, ever had a financial stake in any private entity, and that was with the First and Second National Bank, and the federal government had 20% of that. And our founding fathers were extremely divided over this, and Thomas Jefferson completely opposed it. Madison completely opposed it. Alexander Hamilton was the main champion of, the government should have a vested interest in it. But specifically, his explanation was not that the government should have a vested interest in a private entity. It was that we need some sort of centralized, monetary system, and having the government attached to it would give it some semblance of credibility to where people would feel safe, that knowing that, okay, if we get a loan out from that central bank, then okay, cool, then we're safe. We're not going to lose our money. So even there, they weren't making the perspective from a financial, like, what kind of money are we going to get back from? But then what we saw over the years, it was then used for corrupt purposes, to where ultimately Andrew Jackson campaigned on this, and he actually dismantled the First and Second National Bank, and he actually shut it down to where the federal government was no longer involved in it, because he saw how corrupt it was having the federal government involved with a private entity. After Andrew Jackson, there was not a single example of the federal government ever having a financial stake in this fashion with a private entity until the early 1900s, when we started to see the federal government massively explode, get way too involved in our economy, way too involved in too many things. And then we began to see in certain strategic infrastructures where the federal government would start having a financial stake in a handful of companies. And we've seen that over the course of the 20th century. And now we're seeing it now. It's really dangerous. The vast majority of our founding fathers did not actually want this kind of a thing. They wanted the separation of the federal government from private companies, because it's like, if you want a truly capitalistic society, freedom is the biggest thing. But you can't have freedom if you're having the federal government picking and choosing winners, tipping the scales in one particular direction over another. And basically, if you're picking a winner, then you're also picking a loser. That's not the role of the federal government. The federal government needs to get out of the private economy and then allow the free markets to actually work.
Well, let's switch gears once again in the few minutes that we've got remaining and talk about the paper that you wrote that alleges that X is actually suppressing not freedom of speech, but freedom of reach by throttling posts that they don't necessarily agree with. Who's the guard? Who's keeping? Who's the gatekeeper? Who's watching over what is permissible and what isn't, and what's their criteria?
Yeah, well, so the thing is that, when Elon bought Twitter and turned it into X, he was, making this big deal about freedom of speech. He let all of us, like, I was permanently suspended off of Twitter back in the Jack Dorsey days. I was able to come back on and get an X account and all that kind of stuff over Elon, which is great. But if you look at their terms of service, and the term is still in there, so you could go look it up today. There's a policy that they have which says that you have freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. And essentially that means you're allowed to say whatever you want, but that doesn't mean that they have to actually let anybody see it. And I always use this example. It's like Elon Musk goes into New York Times Square and sets up a stage with speakers and a microphone and sound system. And he's like, we're going to have a free speech event. You can get up there. You can say whatever you want to the microphone. And then you get up and you start talking, and he turns down the volume to the second to lowest setting. And you're like, dude, I thought this was free speech. It's like, it's completely free speech. You can say whatever you want into the microphone, but I never made any guarantees as to the volume. That's what's happening on X right now. And so what's happening is the algorithms have their own Overton window. And actually, if you go back and when he made the code open source for the algorithms, I think it was last year, you could actually see that if somebody was considered far left or far right, then they actually you were actually dinged because they wanted you in this centrist Overton window that was considered mainstream. And so if you were considered having a mainstream viewpoint, you would get amplified. If you were talking outside of what the vast majority of people wanted to hear or were talking about, you actually got demoted. Also, if you post an outbound link on X, you get demoted in the algorithm. So if you're trying to promote your Rumble channel or your Spotify channel or your Apple Podcast link or your own website, you actually get demoted in the algorithms to where you can't promote that kind of stuff. And so when you're actually looking at this, you're like, is this actually freedom of speech if you're not having freedom of reach? And it's like when you look at the First Amendment, we had two specific things in regards to expression that are protected in there. You had freedom of speech, which is your verbal ability to speak freely without restriction from the government. That's like you going down to your town square. You can say whatever you want. The government's not going to restrict you. But freedom of the press wasn't just a bunch of licensed journalists that could go around and write whatever they want. No, it was your individual right to write out your grievances on a piece of paper, go down to your local printing press, print out pamphlets without restriction, and then you can go distribute them freely without the government saying you can or can't. But this kind of a policy is almost like what they're saying is like, well, yeah, you can air out your grievances, you can write it on a piece of paper, but we're only going to let you print, let's say, 10 pamphlets, and then that's it. That's limiting speech. So that's not actually protecting free speech in the way that they're portraying it. And so, it's really important that we understand that if you actually believe in truly the First Amendment and free speech, you cannot by definition have freedom of speech without freedom of reach.
Well, that's an excellent point. And I guess what makes it even more disappointing is that in this case, it's coming from X. And I thought that that's what Elon had absolutely promised not to allow to happen. It's almost like, here we go again.
Yeah, well, it's like his CEO that he hired that's no longer there. But she was she came from, I think, NBC Universal.
Mhm.
She used to work for the I think it was the World Economic Forum. So she's definitely not a conservative voice of a, or even a libertarian voice of any kind that you can possibly think of. But also you have to look at it from the perspective of, so why did he make that pitch? Why did he bring back conservatives onto the platform? Well, it's very easy to see that what he was actually doing is he wanted everybody back on the platform because he wants the data. The data is the key, and we understand this because X was actually recently sold, and a lot of people don't know this. X was actually recently sold and was actually purchased by XAI, which is his
Mhm.
artificial intelligence company. So
Yeah.
X is technically a subsidiary of the artificial intelligence company. Why? Because they're just collecting all of the data. They want your views, they want your opinions. They may not let people see it, but they still want it because they want to pump it into the artificial intelligence. That way they get to know you better, and they can also know how to advertise more effectively to you, how to manipulate the algorithms more effectively, how to push their narratives, how to do all that kind of stuff. And so they wanted your data, which is why they opened it up and claimed it was a free speech platform. So what they do is they just suppress you. They allow you to say whatever you want, and then they're getting their data. Data is king, and that data is what makes AI go round.
Well, thank you for the insights, Jeff. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate your coming on The Truth today. Jeff is an author. He's got 3 books: The Church and State, Social Injustice, and a brand new book that is coming out very shortly. It's now in pre sale. You can buy it, I guess, on Amazon, Jeff, Following the Leader.
Yep. Yeah. Best place to get it is actually on my website, jeffdornick.com. But yeah, following the leader. I'm in the final phases of getting that thing written, and it's all about just what's your getting you to figure out what's your worldview, and not just what do you believe, but why do you believe it? Are you just repeating talking points of what somebody else told you, or do you actually know that what you believe is true? And so we're going to get down to the heart of the matter on that one.
Well, thank you again. Jeff also has his own social media app called Pickaxe. You throttle people there?
We definitely do not throttle people there. Actually, we
Even
don't.
left lunatics.
Yeah, we don't use any algorithms in the news feed. And the really cool thing is, like, you're free as long as it's legal. You can say it. We're actually helping you to have more direct access with your audience, and we've got some really cool Rumble integration to where Rumble videos are playable in the newsfeed as if native to the platform. So it's helping a lot of people, and we've actually having some testing done right now that's actually showing that that people that are posting right now on Pickaxe, their Rumble videos, they're getting significantly higher views on their videos that they're posting directly on our platform, specifically because of the way that we've integrated into it. So it's really cool. A lot of people are joining. We just had the Vigilant Fox join, Children's Health Defense, Daily Cloud, a bunch of amazing people on there. So you guys can definitely check it out.
And where's your website?
Yeah, if you guys just go to pickaxe.com, pickax.com, you guys can sign up for right now. The app is dropping here in a couple of weeks. We're finalizing the app that'll be on iOS and Android, but you guys can follow me over there. That's the best place to find me is on Pickaxe.
Thank you, Jeff. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Protests appear to be the order of the day if you watch the national news. Or maybe you'd like your own entourage with paparazzi, security, and a crowd of admirers. Well, I've discovered just where you can get it. Call Adam Swart. He invented the idea in 2012. Adam, welcome to The Truth. Tell us the truth today.
I promise I will, John. Great to be with you and your listeners.
So, when I was in college, Vietnam protests were pretty much commonplace, but they were genuine. There was, to my knowledge, protesters were not paid to be there. They were not encouraged to be there. They just organically showed up and protested what was considered to be an illegitimate and a wrong war, a wrong expenditure of U.S. taxpayer dollars. And really, I think that war was ended not by the politicians, but more by the college students who really did take to the streets, who marched on Washington. 5 of them paid the ultimate price at Kent State University on the tragic day that the National Guard opened fire on students. It was a low day in American history. But the point is, it was real. Today, I'm not so sure. We see protests in Seattle, in Atlanta, Washington, after the George Floyd debacle. And now we see protests at Tesla stores with people spray painting Tesla cars and keying people's personal properties. And you think, and you probably know, that these are paid protesters. Have I got it right?
Well, let's unpack it from start to finish here because that was a lot. So let's talk about the Vietnam protests, right? So yes, I think first of all, there's kind of misinformation that there's this organic versus astroturf. So there's organic, which is you're not paid, you're genuine, and astroturf means you're busting. You don't really care a lot about the issue at all. The reality is, in America, there's always been money behind politics. There's always been incentives behind why people do what they do. And the idea that that this is some new thing is maybe something I disagree with, right? I mean, I think a lot of these guys who were protesting in Vietnam, yeah, they were passionate about Vietnam, but it was also literally a sex fest, right? So people like these Woodstock and all that, it was literally a sex party. All these people were like smoking weed, having sex. It was a one big orgy. So like, yeah, they were there to oppose Vietnam, but they were there for a lot of other reasons too, personal reasons.
Okay, so I got to call you out on that, Adam. I don't think you were there during the Vietnam protest.
I'm a little young for it.
Exactly. That is my point. I, on the other hand, was there.
Okay.
My college roommate was photographed protesting outside a federal building in Washington. He knows that he had an FBI file open on him because he was a protester, but he was there out of passion and desire, not because of money nor greed. Now, I, on the other hand, was at the Byron Pop Festival, which was actually larger than Woodstock. And it was just outside of Macon, Georgia, and a couple 100,000 people were there. Now, I didn't participate in the festival. I was there because I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a capitalist, and I was there out of pure greed. I operated an ice cream truck, but my job was actually to pick up the money and take it back to town and deposit it in the bank. And it was tens of thousands of dollars. That's a story for another day. But my point is, I was at the Byron Pop Festival, bigger, badder than Woodstock, And believe me, I saw it all. And so everything that you said is correct, but you confuse the two. The Vietnam War protests were not about sex, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll were Woodstock and the Byron Pop Festival. Vietnam protests were Kent State, Washington, and I challenge you and disagree with you that there was anything paid about it. I think it was totally um, organic. My brother happened to have been in ROTC on the Ohio Wesleyan campus in
Sure.
the late 60s, and he was mocked and tormented when he would wear his ROTC uniform to class. All right,
Sure.
I've filibustered enough. I'll let you retort.
No. I appreciate that. I appreciate your perspective. What I would say is this: that this idea that, like, let's talk about what makes something a genuine protest, because I think maybe some of the misinformation online about Crowds on Demand, my company, and what we do is kind of centered on this idea that what we do is somehow manipulative and somehow kind of uh, not genuine. Right. So let me just first say that everyone who attends a Crowds on Demand event is passionate about the cause that they're espousing, right? So we make sure that they are passionate about the cause. Now, we do compensate them. But what we find is if you don't compensate them, and I don't in any way disagree that your roommate and anyone else who was in the Vietnam protests were passionate about what was going on in Vietnam. Um, However, what I would say is that when there's a reason why a lot of those people were college students, right, who were protesting, right? Because right now, if you don't get paid, who is able to protest, right? Retirees, college students, people with flex work jobs, right, like tech industry, people who don't have kids, so you don't have to arrange childcare, right? So those people are all currently overrepresented at protests because essentially the cost for them to attend a protest is minimal. Now, do you know who's underrepresented at protests? People who work at McDonald's, people who are hourly wage workers, right? Someone who owns a taco stand, right? Those people, housekeepers, whatever. Those people are not able to participate. Now, we at Crowds on Demand give those people the ability to participate because we pay them to attend a protest that they support. So now you can take time off because most hourly people don't get time off. If they take time off, it's unpaid, right? We essentially compensate them essentially so that they can go and take that time off.
I'm going to get back to Crowds on Demand, but
Sure.
again, I've got to. Much of what you say is correct. The
Mhm.
college kids have flexibility, flexibility of time, but again, you weren't there. I was.
Yeah.
58,000 Americans. Those college kids you're talking about, 58,000 died in fighting the Vietnam War, which was without a purpose or an end. So
Yes.
the people that you're talking about who protested because they had time, they didn't protest because they were idle and had, it wasn't the devil's workshop. It was there because they were protesting their friends and family who went to a war that didn't come home. I know those people. I knew many of them. And I was that far from having been drafted into the Vietnam War myself. So that's a different perspective than what you're giving us. But all right, go to it. What protest have you sponsored or that people here may have watched on television or seen reported on the news that your people showed up for?
Sure. Well, we don't talk about everything, but I'll give you one example that your listeners would probably enjoy, which is the delete Facebook hashtag delete Facebook. So one thing that right wing, left wing, all kind of agree is that Facebook, Zuckerberg, whatever, is kind of an evil corporation. Whether it's people on the right, they don't really trust Silicon Valley, they think it's liberal. Right? People on the left, they don't trust big corporations, and they know that Facebook has been manipulated, against them, right? So what we were brought in to do is host a series of rallies and a awareness campaign called delete Facebook, hashtag delete Facebook across the country, 17, 18, and 19, around sort of when it became known that Facebook was kind of selling user data and using it to allow people to divide the country and doing even worse things like than that abroad, even causing a genocide in Myanmar, right? So we highlighted all of that through our campaign, and it was actually so effective that they changed their name. They don't go by Facebook anymore. They call themselves Meta.
Are you claiming responsibility for that?
Not 100%. I think I'm sure there were other factors, but I think that we were part of why that occurred, which is essentially the Facebook name is so associated with essentially division, with Americans turning against one another, that they wanted to change their name to disassociate themselves from it. So I don't blame them for that. And the second policy that they changed was making it very hard to do political advertising on their site, because they realized that advertising was giving them a lot of really bad publicity. So to focus more on commercial. Now, I'm not going and defending Facebook current or present activities either, but what I'm saying is that that's kind of an example of the type of campaign that we do that has real impact positively in the world.
Okay, so what do you there's a lot I want to unpack now. What do you attribute Facebook's motives to be in terms of dividing Americans?
It's a profit motive. I mean, their whole motive is they have these algorithms. They make money when you are on their platform as much as possible and engaging as much as possible, right? So if essentially somebody can sell, and the more they know about you, the more they can sell you the ads, whether it's commercial ads or political ads, that essentially have the highest dollar amount. So the more they know about you, the more they could sell ads at a higher dollar amount. Because think about it this way,
Okay, I
John.
got that. I totally got that. That they are a for-profit company, and
Correct.
they don't charge for subscriptions, so their revenue stream is derived from ads. All right, fine. Help me understand. You just said a moment ago that you were proud of the work that you had done with hashtag delete Facebook because they were dividing the American people. Connect
Correct.
the dots for me and help me understand how dividing the American people traces back to a profit motive. I'm not feeling it.
Okay, well, let me explain the algorithms that they have, right? So they have these algorithms that make money based on user information. So they want you engaged as much as possible, because the more you're, as you correctly said, John, you as a user are their product that they then sell to advertisers. So the more they know about you, and the more you're on their platform, then the more they can sell. So if they can use people, and people tend to respond more to divisive political content than they do to inane political content. So something that's kind of facts-based, not right, not left journalism isn't going to engage people. What's going to engage people is the video, even fake videos of here is what this group is doing, right? Here's what Muslims are doing to America. Here's what Latinos are doing to America. Here's what liberals are doing to America. Here's what Trump supporters are doing to America. And something that taps into your preconceived notions, such as, let's just say the Jussie Smollett incident, right, as an example. So they want to send you those videos. It doesn't matter, like in the case of Jussie Smollett, whether it's true or false, right? So that's how they make money, is the more they keep you on the platform. Those videos, that content keeps you
Okay,
on.
so I think I understand your point. You're saying they basically poke the beehive because people
Correct.
are drawn to the buzz, if you will allow the metaphor to continue.
That's correct.
All right, I can relate to that. So we saw a lot of rioting after George Floyd died. And we saw it in Portland, Seattle, Atlanta, Washington, other prominent cities around the world. And we saw burning, looting, and destruction of property and injury to people. Do you maintain or do you believe that those were paid protests?
I think there was a lot of money behind those efforts. So let me explain it in the context of Russian dolls, right? So let's just say there's some billionaire, right, who wants to create chaos on our streets. The billionaire is not going to go address the crowd and say, let's create chaos on our streets, right? That wouldn't make any sense. They didn't become a billionaire by being stupid. They would create a foundation. The foundation would fund advocacy groups. The advocacy groups would fund academic programs that might create fellowships where those people do what they're doing. Maybe they fund dummy corporations to pay cash to people who are throwing Molotov cocktails. So you create 5, 6, 7 layers of essentially division between the billionaire or whoever's funding it and what's going on the street. So yeah, they are being funded, and let me give you some more evidence that they are funded. Right? Number one, this is pertaining to some of the more recent protests. There was tactical gear. Tactical gear is very expensive. There was someone distributing off a truck, hundreds of tactical gear. Right? So that is someone's paying that bill. Right? That's not free. Right? Legal fees that are being paid for the protesters. That's not free, right? The organization, the permits, the sound systems, right? All of those things are essentially money. So yeah, there's funding. Now, let me just say though that the fact that there's money behind a protest does not mean it is illegitimate. So I think we slightly misinterpreted one another when we were talking about the Vietnam protesters, because I wasn't trying to in any way delegitimize them. What I was saying is there can be money behind a cause and the people can care about a cause.
And trust me, Adam, I didn't call you on here so that I could argue with you about Vietnam. It's just that you
Sure.
triggered me with a couple of things that you said. And I
Sure.
think, and I was trying to draw a line between a organic protest that comes out of passion versus one that comes out of opportunism and money.
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
I think, and we'll get to it as we unpack this a little bit, but I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, that Crowds on Demand is a for profit venture.
That's
And
correct.
are you agnostic when it comes to politics? Liberal, conservative, Republican,
I
Democrat?
tend to be pretty
Are you
independent.
for Israel or Pakistan? I mean, do you care about any of the issues, or are you strictly there for the mighty dollar?
So two things, right? So I'm politically independent, right? So I grew up as a Democrat. I worked most of my college life as a Democrat, right? But now I'm independent because the Democratic Party has lost its way. So I don't ascribe to the Democratic Party. I don't support the Republican Party. We work with conservatives. We work with liberals. We not on the opposite side of the same issue, but I like to work on the side of common sense. So I will admit to you, John, when I started my business, I was empowered completely by the almighty dollar. If somebody is willing to pay me to do something and it's legal, no problem, we'll do it. Now I've been in business 13 years. I'm a little bit more selective on what I take on. I like to be on the side of common sense. Now, that is subjective. What is common sense? It's what I say it is, right? So, because it's my business. So, there are areas where I think that the Democrats are on the side of common sense, such as I don't think people should die because they don't have access to health care in this country. I think that's wrong. I think everyone has the right to health care.
When you say that you're not in favor of depriving people of health care, guess
Yes.
what? I am a conservative, card carrying member of the Republican Party, and neither am I.
Yep.
Here's where you lose me though. Healthcare is not a right. And I'm all in favor of helping people that need help. What I'm not in favor of is helping people that won't help themselves. Where do you
Sure.
draw the line? Who has got to draw the line? I think
Sure.
right now that we've swung way too far over to socialism, and I think Donald Trump is trying to bring us back. I'm all about teaching the man to fish if he will fish for himself. But I'm not in favor of giving the man fish and having him become dependent on society for his existence, because that leads to low self esteem, which leads to crime and bitterness.
And I oppose the welfare state. And I think, for example, one area where Republicans are in the side of common sense is in the area of police. Like, no one wants to defund the police nonsense, right? So obviously that makes no sense. Where, I mean, obviously you didn't have me on to talk about healthcare, but I will just throw out one other point. Is yes,
Yeah, no, let's go. Let's do it.
I agree with that, but even if the man refuses to fish, I don't think he should starve. So you say teach the man to fish. I say yes, teach the man to fish. But if he refuses to fish, then give him some protein powder and some water so he doesn't starve.
I'll give you protein powder and water, but I just fundamentally disagree with you. I think that you're recreating the laws of nature, and I happen to have this paradigm that God put us here to learn. And
I don't want to welfare state.
you know how the saying goes, "No good deed goes unpunished."
Yes, I've found
I used to think that that's just like a colloquialism that's kind of funny on one side but true on the other. I really kind of think that God set it up that way, that, you
that.
know, He's in charge of teaching men how to live. And when we try to intervene by propping them up, it's not God's will, I don't believe. But I do think God would want us to help our fellow man when they're in a place of need and desperation.
Yes.
I'm all about it. I've worked for the last 15, well, I worked for 15 years, not the last 15 years, but I've unfortunately gotten away from it because of geographical divides. But I worked in the inner city in Atlanta, the worst zip code in America for every social ill you can define. And so I'm perfectly uh, in favor of helping people. I am not in favor of propping them up
I
when they
agree.
refuse to help themselves. So that may be
I agree.
where you and I agree, but we don't know where to draw that line.
I think it's about where you draw the line. And
Yeah.
for example, I believe that drug addicts on the streets of Atlanta or San Francisco or LA should be forced to seek treatment or go elsewhere, because you can't shoot up on my streets. That's never going to happen. That's not going to fly. Right? That's common sense. No,
Well, and then that's a libertarian view, and I actually subscribe to that. I think that people should be free to live their lives as they see fit.
but not on our
They
streets.
they can engage in sexual promiscuity. They
Yep.
can engage in taking illegal drugs.
Yep.
They can what else can they do? They can eat until they're obese. They can
Yes.
eat candy until their teeth fall out. But
Yep.
here's where you and I probably are going to disagree. I
Yep.
am not willing to pay for the methadone program. I am
No.
not willing to pay for the diabetes treatment. I am not willing to pay for the health care that they have brought into their own lives. And I don't think God wants us to.
And so I think if you're saying, hey, we should educate people better, I completely agree. I completely agree. People need to be educated, and sometimes that needs to be through tougher methodology, right? And I completely think that when you see these drug addicts on the street, in California in particular, it's just absurd, right? What's being allowed to happen, right? That they're shooting up right next to kids in the parks, right? And that there needs to be zero tolerance for that, and they need to receive treatment mandatory. Um, and the my challenge is and this is probably my bleeding heart liberal thing coming in, is I just don't like the idea of people dying on the streets. You know what I mean? And even if they're making dumb choices, I still think we need to save them. You know what I mean? And that's maybe you and I disagree on that. So that's why I said I'm not a liberal, I'm not a conservative. My liberal side comes out in this regard. Like, even if you're an overeater, even if you're a smoker, and if you smoked 10 packs a day for 20 years, and you basically are coming in with lung cancer, yeah, you caused your lung cancer, but we should still help you. I'm sorry, we should still provide a doctor to help get you through it. I'm sorry, I'm not going to let that person die. That, if you and I disagree about that, that's okay. I respect your point of view, but that's my opinion.
No, I actually do agree with what you said. I would not withhold care from someone who is in desperation. I would help rehabilitate their health and hopefully rehabilitate their state of mind. But at some point, and I wrestled with this in my own mind.
Yeah.
Where do you draw that line
Yes.
between helping them and enabling them? And
Enabling.
that is the line that I'm trying to always search for. And I've done
That's
that
a good.
with my own kids. I mean, they're adults now, and I'm very proud of them. But when they were teenagers, they're all boys, three boys, and they're all boys. I mean, one of them used to climb up the gutter at 2 in the morning to sneak in after he had snuck out. And so I wrestled with discipline and love. I think
Yeah.
every parent wrestles with that line. And my wife erred on the side of enabling. I erred on the side of discipline. In a
Sure.
broader social context, I think the same principles apply. So
Agreed.
I don't think there's a hard and fast answer to it. And the fact that you do have a big heart actually kind of endears you to me and our listeners. So no apology necessary. But let's get back to the crowds on demand conversation that we originally started this with. So you're agnostic. You will provide a crowd for any political persuasion or cause, if I understand you correctly.
If it has a common sense bent to it. So there are things that we won't do, right? We won't work with hate groups. We won't. I try to focus on targeting powerful interests, right? Not targeting down. I don't. My mom always taught me, don't hit down, hit up. Right. So if you're upset, I mean, I'll give you an example. You're upset in an airline, because your flight was canceled. You don't yell at the flight attendant or customer service. You'll yell at the CEO of the airline who scheduled the flights that way. Right. So my kind of feeling is I like to focus on events where we're targeting city council, the Senate, Congress, big corporations, major interests, and trying to persuade. Number one, the other thing I really like to do is persuade. Like everything that we take on, I don't want it to just create noise and be screaming at people. That doesn't work. I want to persuade. So what I always ask my clients is, how are we, and sometimes I'll try to answer that for them, how are we going to persuade the person who either doesn't know about the issue or sees the issue from the other perspective, right? Can we get them a little bit over to our side rather than just yelling? I mean, so when it comes to Israel, Palestine, there's just so much yelling, and I didn't see anybody being convinced, right? It was just, here's why our side is good and your side is evil, and here's why, and vice versa.
Well, their side is evil because they slaughtered 200 people at a music festival, and they
Right.
killed pregnant women, and they cut off the heads of young children, babies. So you want compassion. So do I.
Yeah.
But when Hamas commits these atrocities, it deprives me of feeling any compassion towards them
I
whatsoever.
have no compassion for Hamas.
It is complete annihilation at that point. It is genocide
Right.
against Hamas. On that, I side with Israel. Now, if they want to come to the table and they want to stop the atrocities, start by
Yeah.
releasing the hostages, and then
Yes.
we'll talk about rehabilitation and rebuilding. But until then, it is all out war and destruction, according to John and according to Netanyahu. I'm sorry.
Well, I'll push back a little bit. So I agree
No,
100% when it comes to Hamas. There's no mercy for those people. They're killers. They're evil, right? And what the intelligent way that Israel has gone after them, like with the pagers, but that was Hezbollah. But those type of things, I completely condone. I mean, these are evil people. I mean, to take those hostages and do what they did, and that was just the most recent of the heinous crimes. So I have no sympathy. I do have sympathy for the people of Palestine who are suffering, who, again, the Israeli far right can say, oh, well, they voted for Hamas. Okay. But ultimately, I'm not blaming the civilians. They're women, children, whole families that have been wiped out. And it's important to note that the Israeli cabinet, some of the far right ministers in Israel have basically said, no, we do want to cleanse Gaza of all the people. We want them all out so that we can build this sort of kind of biblical vision of Israel, right? So when they are saying that, which is to me, that's very troubling because it indicates that their objective is not security, and rather that their objective is to do something that would displace all these people, right? So I don't agree with that. I agree 100% Israel has the right to defend itself, but I disagree in this particular regard, and I think that
and Adam, so do I. I think that here again, we're just talking about our own perspectives.
yeah,
But the Ku Klux Klan committed heinous acts in the United States in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
yeah,
So it is very understandable that black people would think that all white people must be sympathetic to the Ku Klux Klan.
correct.
Just like a lot of white people make the same mistake where it comes when it comes to the Black Panthers, who were a violent organization in the 60s and 70s, by stereotyping all black people as violent and bad.
Yes,
I think we're doing the same thing with
yes,
Palestine, and we're confusing, as you correctly point out, the differences between Hamas and Palestinians. And
yes,
so when I say uh, wipe them out, I am specifically and exclusively referring to the members of Hamas who
yes.
are demonic, evil people, because
I
I don't know a solution short of that.
no,
Because
I don't.
we've tried
Yep,
for 20 years. We've tried a Palestinian state, and we're
yep,
going to go to neutral corners. We're going to live independently. The problem is the Palestinian people are poor. And,
yes,
when you're poor and you don't have options, you knee jerk go to desperation, and those are not always good choices. And
no.
so I think that some members of the Palestinian people have aligned with Hamas, and therein lies their mistake.
Out of
I think
desperation.
Trump actually sees that and
Yes,
wants the United States to go in and be a key peacekeeper, drive Hamas out, but create a Palestinian place where
yeah.
people can live and provide subsistence to them so they can have meaningful, safe lives. I like that.
Yeah, and far be it for me to diagnose the root of middle conflict in the Middle East, which has been going on for many, many
Yeah,
years,
me either.
before us both, and after us both, probably. But the unfortunate part is that, and I'm very privy to this in my business, is you have an industry on both the Hamas, as you said, but also the Israel far right and certain people in this America that actually want to keep this conflict going, whether it's for profit or for their own political opportunism, right? So if there was peace, they would sabotage it, right? So there's a reason why people like Anwar Sadat in Egypt was assassinated by a radical Muslim Brotherhood, I believe it was. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think that's
But
right.
also Yitzhak Rabin, the peacemaker Israeli prime minister, was assassinated by a far right Israeli, right, who didn't want peace. So you have these groups on both the far right in Israel and the terrorists in the Palestinian area, right? And they don't want peace, and because if there were peace, they would not have relevancy politically. So and Netanyahu is a political opportunist of the highest caliber, and he sees in this an opportunity get out of his own legal challenges, right, for this bribery case and other things, right? So he likes what's going on because it gets him out of his political problems, because that really is what he doesn't want to talk about. Is his criminal case, right? Which was, by the way, was filed against him by his own attorney general. So this wasn't some sort of political kind of witch hunt of Netanyahu. So I think it's unfortunate. But and I'm not trying to set any kind of equivalency. I think there's no moral equivalency between Netanyahu and Hamas, because Netanyahu, while I think he's done a lot of bad things, has not purposefully murdered civilians, while Hamas has. But I do think both of them have a real interest in this war continuing.
Well, I don't profess to be an expert on the Middle East. It's far too
Yeah,
convoluted and complex for my simple brain to understand it in depth.
yep.
Um, you know, Netanyahu's been around a long time. I think the Israeli people really do appreciate him. I do think that he is a patriot for his country and wants to have a secure country for he and his people to live in. And
Mhm.
I'll leave it at that. But let's get back. We can start talking about crowds on demand, and then we get sucked into these side issues, which I enjoy talking about.
Me too.
But do you believe that the protests that we saw, let's get back to it, after George Floyd, were those organic or were they sponsored? You know your you know your competition, right? I mean, you're in this business, so you certainly know your competition, I'm thinking.
Well, let me give you a story. So back in around 2015, I was approached by some of the organizers of the Black Lives Matter. A lot of people think BLM started in 2020. It started in 2015. Um, and they were saying, we want to create this. This was after what happened to Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown in Ferguson, and Trayvon Martin, I think it was in Florida, right? And they said, we want to launched like a movement to empower the Black community. And I said, I am 100% on board. Here's what I think we should do. We should focus on economic empowerment and make the Black community into a independent, non-aligned voting bloc, right? Because the fact that they've been aligned with the Democratic Party has actually reduced their power. So I said, let's make the whole emphasis on ownership and wealth, right? Which is ultimately when you talk to ordinary Black folks, that's what they want. They want ownership, they want wealth, because they've been denied it in this country for so long for various reasons, right? So
All right, now
that,
Adam,
yes,
we're going on a fork in the road again. What my question is very simple. Were the BLM the responses to George Floyd, were they organic or were they sponsored? It's not a complicated question.
they were sponsored. They were sponsored. And a lot of the list of sponsors are companies that you know about. Amazon, for example, as my understanding, was a donor to Black Lives Matter, right? A lot of major companies were. And there were two reasons that they did it. Number one, I think there was this genuine outpouring, and there was a genuine outpouring of outrage after what happened to George Floyd. That among a lot of people across the political spectrum. I mean, even
I didn't like what happened to George Floyd. I mean,
me, 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 yeah, me
any
too.
living human with a conscience and a moral
Yes.
compass of right and wrong has to be able to watch that video and
I
say
think
this is wrong. I
yes.
mean, you got six cops standing around one drug crazed person, and he's saying, "I can't breathe. Take your damn knee off his
It's
neck."
offensive
I mean,
police
it's
brutality.
insanity. I think my problem with that is I don't think we know the truth. I
No,
don't believe that what we saw on that video tells the whole story.
true.
Floyd and that cop, whatever his name was, I can't
Totally.
remember it right now, knew
Totally.
each other because they were both bouncers at a nightclub and they had gone back. They went back years. I think that it was murder and I think it was intentional, but I don't think it was because George Floyd stole a Twinkie from the convenience store.
Well,
That's
I
just
also
what I suspect. I don't have proof.
I think it's very interesting. I mean, I don't want to get on a tangent with this, but I
Yeah,
would
I know
say
we're going down another path.
another tangent. But what I would say is this, right? Companies, there was a lot of people. What I was saying is there's a genuine outpouring of a lot of genuine sentiment by a lot of people who said this is outrageous that someone can be basically murdered in the street by an officer of the law who's supposed to protect people, right? So I think some of it was genuine, but then a lot of it is what I call protection money. So a lot of major corporations paid BLM because essentially they don't want those rioters showing up on their streets, right? Outside
Right.
Amazon or Google or Facebook or whatever the case may be. BlackRock, all these companies, and I don't know specifically which ones specifically donated and how much, but basically it's a who's who of the wealthiest people in America and the wealthiest companies in America gave money to BLM. So if you're asking if it's sponsored, of course it was sponsored. Now, a lot of these people were genuinely outraged, but I think a lot more of that money was basically like, hey, don't come after us, because it's, I mean, when we're in 2025 and we're in sort of a right-wing purge, it's hard to put ourselves into 2020 where there was a left-wing purge, right? And I oppose purges from all sides, right? But there was basically anyone who would, like, there was a professor who basically said, I don't agree with the method of Black Lives Matter, and he was fired, right? Corporate executives who would donate to certain candidates would be fired, right? There was a purge going on. So a lot of corporations donated to BLM, such as in a hope, the same way that you'd pay protection money to the mafia, is essentially, we don't want to be the target of your ire. Right. So, yeah, I mean, if you're asking whether it was sponsored, yes, number one, it was sponsored. Number two, a lot of the people who were there were genuine. But number three, a lot of the people were there to flex on Instagram. I mean, a lot of the cast members of the Real Housewives franchise, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, were out there at the BLM protests. And I always say, do you think they know anything about institutional racism or police brutality? I mean, give me a effing break, right? These women were there to post on social media to seem like they were woke, right? And with the cause. So the reality is it's complex, but there was a lot of money behind BLM. Doesn't mean that BLM had no merit whatsoever.
Adam, you've talked about everybody except the organizations that I would expect you to talk about, i.e., the NGOs, where a lot of federal money flows, and I think they are behind a lot of these protests, and none other than George Soros. Now, why have you not mentioned him by name?
Well, I don't want to get a cease and desist letter from his lawyers. But
You're scared. Well, Donald Trump isn't scared. He's named him a person of interest, and he's going to go after him as someone who is engaged in treasonous activity, I believe.
Well, let me put it this way. I do not, there's a lot of, first of all, a lot of people are taking money from Soros without even knowing it. So that's one thing, is that you have to understand that, and not just Soros, a lot of other billionaires, they have this web. Remember, I was talking earlier about Russian dolls. There was money that is flowing from Soros. He's probably funding right-wing organizations too. I mean, his motivations are very.
Whoa. What would possibly lead you to make a statement like that? He is the Antichrist for your conservative.
Okay, that's what you think. But let me just go to how. So what is the reason why George Soros is. So the best hypothesis for Soros is he makes money through chaos, right? So when there is chaos, so how did you know how he became a billionaire?
I really don't.
So he became a billionaire, in my understanding, is he essentially made a ton of money based on the collapse of the British pound. So essentially the British economy, their monetary system was collapsing, and he bet it would collapse, and that is how his hedge fund made all that money. Right. So the better explanation than he's some sort of leftist, right? He's a billionaire. His motives are profit seeking, right? So he wants chaos. He will fund whoever is bringing the chaos that he can then use to short the market, right? So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information out there that he's funded leftist organizations, but can you prove that he is not in some way also funding right-wing organizations?
I have heard and read zero evidence of that. What I have read and what I do believe is that he hates this country. He wants to change the fabric of America, as Barack Obama said that he wanted to do. And we know that Soros has funded Obama and his campaigns. And that's what I take them at their word. I take them at face value.
I'm just a question for you. So do you know who Scott Bessent is?
You mean the
secretary.
Secretary of the United States Treasury who used to
Yes,
work for George Soros?
George Soros, and he was a top lieutenant for George Soros. Why would Trump hire Soros's top lieutenant? I mean, I'm just asking you sincere question.
Maybe because he's brilliant, maybe because he's honest, and maybe because he's good at what he does. The fact that someone worked.
If he was all the evil, if Trump hated Soros as much as he said, why? I mean, you didn't, after the end of World War II, the United States didn't hire a bunch of people who worked for Hitler, right? And Hitler probably had people who were evil but very intelligent working for him, right? So, I mean, I just do think it's curious that the Secretary of the Treasury was one of Soros's top lieutenants for a very long time. Is that not curious?
Yeah, Adam, you're saying guilt by association.
No, I'm not saying anything.
That is not a sustainable thought process.
I'm
I
saying
worked
it's
for a law firm for 5 years when I
Sure.
started my career. One of the people who I liked the most turned out to have embezzled from the law firm that I worked for. That does not make me an embezzler. I'm sorry. You've got two facts. Besant worked for Soros. Soros is evil. That does not mean that Besant is evil. There is a disconnect there.
But Besant worked
You
for
sound like
Soros.
a conspiratorialist.
So my question is, no, I mean, I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that I just find it really curious that Trump hired George Soros, one of George Soros's top lieutenants. I'm not suggesting anything. I just find it really curious and it's not something that
you are suggesting something by
I
having
didn't suggest-
merely brought it up and making the linkage. Look, I'm curious about it too, but I have seen nothing to support any inference that Scott Bessent is not a masterful Secretary of the U.S. Treasury. Enough said, period. I don't care who he worked for 30 years ago.
Okay. You're entitled that's fine. Maybe he is a good Secretary of Treasury. I just think it's curious. Because
put your investigative hat on and go down that rabbit hole and come back and tell us what you find. I mean, I'm open to receiving information if there is any. I just haven't simply found any, other than early on in his career, he worked for an organization that was controlled by George Soros. God help us if that's the grounds for being indicted and prosecuted.
Yeah, sure. Well, look, and by the way, just to be clear, I just want to be very clear. I think the influence Soros has been very damaging on this country. So I don't want to parse words in that regard. And the biggest thing that he's done that's damaged our country is these DAs. So district attorney races tend to have very little money in them, but he basically has put a ton of money behind these people who are like, I'm not going to prosecute crime. I'm not going to prosecute any theft. I'm just going to let chaos reign on the streets. And he elected people not just in San Francisco and LA, like George Gascon, right, but also people in places like St. Louis, right, which is not even known as a left-wing city, right? So he, So I think that's been really destructive. And of course, the people, we were talking about BLM, the people who have been worst affected by it are communities of color and working class people. Because when you're a well-to-do person, you're immune from some of the effects of crime. But if you're working the graveyard shift at a Walgreens, right, at, midnight, and some whack job comes in and steals and, threatens you, and that person is then arrested, but then released back onto the street, that causes chaos in the community. So I don't disagree with you about Soros, but I don't think we're hearing the full story about Soros. And I think that Soros is funding things on the right as well.
Well, I've seen no evidence of that. If you have any evidence of it, I am certainly open to receiving it. I understand your hypothesis, and you may be right, because I have not been able to get inside of George Soros's head to find out what his true motivation is.
He hasn't agreed to come on your show?
Well, first of all,
I would love to see
haven't
that.
invited him, but I will. I don't think that he will come, but I will definitely invite him and his son to come on, and we'll have a good old conversation. But George Soros does have bad motives. I just haven't figured out exactly what they are. You've offered a hypothesis that I have not heard before, but it does have a certain ring of truth. My suspicion is that he is doing the work of a foreign adversary that is intent on dividing our country. Because I'll just tell you, to me, Black Lives Matter, just the very phrase itself, may be the most divisive phrase that I've ever heard. I mean, it says that Black Lives Matter, but everybody else's lives don't. And
Sure.
but I don't think that was the intent of the people who that are black who say that
Correct.
out of conviction, because I do understand that black people in this country have been denied, persecuted, and been
Yes, we have.
severely mistreated for centuries. I think it is not stopped completely, but it is on the path to betterment. Okay,
Yes.
so we'll have to save that for a whole separate conversation sometime. But the message is not effective, because if the message is for all of us to get along and judge each other by the character and the quality of our hearts rather than the color of our skin, it is totally destructive from that for achieving that goal.
I agree.
So I do think that it has been created out of uh, bad intent and as a means of dividing us as people. And I just don't think we should fall for it. Now,
I
similarly, defund the police is the dumbest thing I have ever heard in my entire life.
Yep.
But the most people, the people who suffered the most from violent crime in the United States are members of the black community.
That's correct. By
Most homicides in Chicago,
yes.
they don't affect white people near as much as they do black people. I think that 90% of the deaths in Chicago that are the result of homicide is black on black crime.
Yep.
So defunding the police is lunacy.
It is.
But here's where I think we could find common ground. How about simply hold all people accountable?
I agree.
I don't want to get rid of cops. I just want to hold the bad cops accountable and
Yes.
surgically remove them from the organizations where they defy the laws that they take an oath to uphold. So
Yes.
these right leaning phrases and the left leaning phrases, to your point, don't accomplish anything except division.
That's
Let's
correct.
find where the commonality of thought is. I think we can agree that black people should not be unfairly treated. Period.
Yes.
Whether
Yes.
it's by their neighbor or by the police or by an
Yes.
institution.
Yes.
We've got to close that chapter. But saying Black Lives Matter, I'm saying, is not the stepping stone to that objective. Just like I am saying defund the police is not a stepping stone towards reforming the police.
I completely agree with everything you said
All
on
right,
that. Like, could not agree more.
good. Then let's finish with crowds on demand.
Okay.
Are there any crowds that you funded that you regretted?
I think where I regretted it is when in the early part of my business, we did not focus enough on making sure that the people who we had sincerely agreed with the issue. So that led to some bad publicity about around the idea of we're hiring actors and we're bussing in actors to basically say things that they don't necessarily agree with, right? And I have made it my top priority, and I will tell you and your listeners this, John. We have lost money by doing this. Like, this is costing us money to make sure that all of the people at all of our advocacy events sincerely agree with the cause. And it's been my top priority over the past 5 or 6 years to make sure of it personally with every event that we do. And I'll tell
Well,
you,
how do you do that? Do you say, "Hey, I'm going to pay you $100"? Now, you do agree with this protest, right? Is that how you do it?
well, yeah, so we'll basically ask people, hey, do you agree with, are you an environmentalist, right? So then let's just say we're protesting a power plant, right? Maybe we reach out, or we already have a network of environmentalists, right? Depending on where, right? And we talk to environmentalists, we get them out there, right? So maybe we talked about the police, right? And crime. Maybe we have people who've been victims of crime who want to talk about how important it is to have police, right? So we have ways of doing that, right? And I don't have time to go into all of that now, but we have ways.
Give us
of
the top 3 ways that you vet people to ensure that they are there legitimately and sincere.
Number one, we look at social media. We have them send us their social media stuff if they're already like active on the issue. Number two, we straight up ask them the question. And number three, we see if they're part of an existing group already, right? And number four, sometimes people will reach out proactively to us or to some of the people who I have working for me, and say, hey, if you have any pro police events in Minneapolis, let me know, right? So I take that as them being pro police, right? Do you see what I'm saying? So there are more ways.
What I'm hearing you say is that you're only really providing a forum for people to have a voice and to speak out on causes they care about, and
Correct.
you're willing to compensate them along the way so they can afford to leave work or home or whatever it is to do it.
That's correct. That's correct.
Right. Now,
but that wasn't always
I did have George Soros on this show, and I came at him like I've kind of come at you. What do you think he's likely to say?
Well, first of all, I think the likelihood of him coming on your show is is pretty limited.
I think you just marginalized me, Adam. How dare you?
Well, I don't think I've seen an interview with him in 20 years. So
I'm
I think
teasing you. I'm teasing you. I agree.
but if you did have him on there, but I like the idea that he should come on there, because honestly, I think people would respect him more if he went and came on these interviews and said, "Hey, this is why I'm funding these campaigns." Right? I think people would actually respect him more if he said, "Here's why I'm doing it, and here's what I'm doing." Right?
I might agree that people would disrespect him maybe marginally less.
Yeah.
I think we'd still end up at disrespect. All right, so.
So you have Soros on your show.
Social media, yes. George Soros comes on the show, and I ask him, how dare you fund people that go and cause injury to persons and property and help further divide our already divided country?
He would say, I'm not doing that.
And how about you, Adam? Are you doing that? Do any of your protests turn violent or end up in damaging persons or property?
Never. I've been doing this 13 years. Never once. And I hope it'll never happen, because we're safer than your average protest. You know why? We compensate people to attend. We vet the people who attend. We often have security on site. We are literally, so we've never had an incident. We tell people, our one policy that I also did about 5 or 6 years ago was no swearing at our events. So literally, you're not even allowed to curse, which is a rule I don't even myself follow some of the time. So we don't let people curse. We don't let people break the law. We are actually respectful advocates for the cause. Like I said, I always tell my clients, I want my people to be brand ambassadors for the cause or your company. Now, I would say that, but the difference between my explanation and perhaps Soros' explanation, because I'm not saying I have no proof that Soros is funding violence, but if he is doing it, it would be several layers removed. The difference is I'm not funding violence or law breaking at any level. There's no levels removed. It's just simply not happening. Our people are there to be peaceful, respectful advocates. Period. Full stop.
For money.
Well, we are compensated to conduct advocacy campaigns and to conduct protests and to conduct publicity stunts. And it's the same way that your advertisers pay money to advertise on your show if you have sponsors, right? It's the same. Yes, that's for money, but I presume that you wouldn't take a sponsor whose product you severely disagreed with. Is that accurate? You seem like a very principled guy.
Well, thank you for that observation, and I will accept the compliment because that is truly how I live my life. Try to live my life as imperfect as a person as we all are. Um,
Yes.
I'll say this, Adam. I was really ready to get down and dirty with you today because the problem that I have, and I don't mean this contentiously or disrespectfully, but the protest lack genuineness when money comes into play.
Mhm.
But I will tell you this: for our radio listeners that are not on the live stream, Adam is a really attractive young guy. Number two, and I'm married 48 years. I don't mean that in any other way other than just as a compliment. You're a nice looking guy, and I've come at you pretty good, and you have not gotten angry, belligerent, or defensive. I think you have been very respectful in your answers, and I find it incredibly difficult to dislike you on any level, which is another way of saying I really like you, Adam, and I appreciate you coming on the show. And I've enjoyed the respectful, candid conversation that we've had
I like
today.
it. That's the only conversation I like to do, and I try to impart that same respect in my business. And when we're doing protests, and sometimes protests, it's a very sensitive issues, but we always try to do it as respectfully as possible, just as we did on this show. And I think we're two people with principles, as you correctly said, imperfect people, maybe, but we are trying to do. I think you're trying to do your best, and I think I'm trying to do our best, and I'm hoping we can. And I know that we haven't that some things that we do don't appear to unite the country, and I'm working on doing more campaigns to bring this country together. And I know you're trying to do the same thing.
That's something I could get on board with. I think the leadership, and look, they're all to blame: Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals. Every chance they get to unite the country, they end up knee jerk appealing to their base, which loves the fire and brimstone, whether it's conservative or liberal. And I think that therein lies the difficulty. And I don't think that the good old days used to be as bad. I think when Reagan was president and Tip O'Neill was Speaker of the House, they disagreed, but they could have a cocktail after work and
Yep.
have a friendly, cordial relationship with one another. That's what I yearn for, not
Yep.
on so much on for the politicians, but for the country. I
Yes.
think the divisiveness has got to stop, but the leaders have to lead. And the way to do
Yes.
that is not to get reelected, but to bring the country together. Earn your
Yep.
stripes that way.
Maybe open primaries too. I'll throw that out there. It's just as in the end, open primaries that are open where anybody can go run, and the top two advance to the next to the final round, and then people can vote. So you're not running as you're not having Republicans run to the right and Democrats run to the left. You have everybody's competing for every vote.
I'll be down with that if you and George Soros both agree to go to neutral corners and not try and shape opinions by leading protest. That to me lacks a certain degree of genuineness. But I respect you as a person. I respect you as an entrepreneur, as a capitalist, because I'm right in there with you. I love working for the dollar.
Yep.
I don't really like accepting gratuitous gifts, which I really haven't since my parents departed this earth. But I sure am grateful to them for everything they gave me. But just earn it the old fashioned way works for me. And I think that's truly what you are setting out to do.
Trying.
And I wish you well and look forward to having you back on the truth.
Yeah, anytime, John. It was a pleasure. I've loved spending this hour with you and your listeners.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your weekend.
You too. Thanks, John.